As leaders of churches, most of us are already thinking about the end of 2021. And it's not only time to plan for holiday services and events, but it's also a great time to communicate vision for year-end giving and connect with our legacy givers. In this month's podcast, we'll begin the conversation on my 12 keys for healthy church finances and how to build and sustain a legacy team, all here on the Grow Leader podcast.
There's a lot of content in podcast today.
Probably too much.
12 points, and we're going to go there. But don't get nervous if you're listening right now in the car. Maybe you're working out for a run. We'll have every single thing in the show notes. And I want to ask you this: as we talk about church finances, and I've been a part of two different church staffs. So one a long time ago, and then took a break in the marketplace, and then joined the team here at Highlands. And I've seen two very, very different worlds when it comes to church finances. And it's a big deal. It affects the entire staff team. It affects every Sunday. But I know this, that if you have healthy church financial systems, you don't just know this stuff. Where did you learn this? Where did you pick up how to have these systems that we experience today at Highlands?
Yeah. Well, really, the thesis of this podcast and really of this talk that I put together several years ago was that you have to have healthy principles in place in order for the blessing of healthy finances to happen. I think sometimes churches and pastors look for gimmicks, or they look for, the right sermon to preach or something like that. But I believe, my dad taught me this, that if you'll decide your principles ahead of time, it takes the pressure off. And I think too many people live by pressure instead of by principles. And so it was my dad. If you're asking that question, my dad was probably the most brilliant financial mind I knew. He went on to be with the Lord in 2010. He was the legislative auditor for the state of Louisiana. He taught me finances. I remember going on a vacation at 8 years old, and Dad brought an envelope of money to my older brother and my sister and me with our spending money. And he was teaching us budgeting. So he put all this cash, it wasn't probably $20, $30 in our envelope. And he says, you can spend this at the first, gas station you come to, or you can save it. You can not spend it all, and you can have it when we get back home from vacation. He says, and if we're all doing something, I'll pay for it. But if you ever want something that we're not all doing, go to your envelope. And if there's money in there, the answer is yes. And if there's not any money in there, the answer is no. And I was learning the principle of budgeting at 8 years old. I remember him helping me open up my first checking account at 12 years old. And then you fast forward to me getting into ministry. I started ministry at 20 years old on staff of, I still call it my home church, Bethany in Baton Rouge. And my pastor, Larry Stockstill, who's still my pastor since I was 15 years old, had such a frugality about him, very, very generous. Bethany, all the years that I was a part of Bethany, was giving more than 25% of the income to missions, which find me another church that does that. Building buildings with cash, kind of doing less for themselves so they could do more for others. And so these principles, I'd like to take credit for them, but I'm just a product of being around healthy principles. So that's kind of where it all came from.
That's awesome. So let's get started. There's 12 of them, and we've got a lot to go through. I'm excited about this, though. Where do we start first? Everybody's got a financial system they're using now. It's probably not as healthy as it could be. Where can they start right now today?
Yeah, and I really need an hour to teach this material, and so we'll make all the material available to everybody that's listening. But let's just hang out on a couple of them as we go through, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time that we have together. But the first one is, before you ask for money or want more money, we have to be a good steward of the resources we have. And I'd like to read a verse out of 1 Corinthians where the Bible says in chapter 4, so then men ought to regard us leaders as servants of Christ, as those entrusted with the secret things of God. And listen to this line. And now it is required that those who have been given that trust, so whoever God picked as leaders, must be proved faithful. So I think one of the responsibilities that we have as leaders is to kind of live with a lifestyle that God can honor. Luke 16:10, Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with little can be trusted with much, and whoever's dishonest with little can be dishonest with much. And Matt, when I teach this, I even talking about like, what's the condition of the floorboard of our car?
Yeah, that's great.
And you know, what does our closets look like right now? And why would God be willing to give us more if we're not handling what we have well already? And so I just think it behooves us. I like that word. It behooves us to kind of go through and do an audit of our lives and say, instead of saying, God, give me more, are we handling what He's given us well? Are we stewarding it well? And I think we have that expectation of people, and I think God has that expectation of us.